So picture this. You wake up on a perfectly ordinary Tuesday.
Just a normal run-of-the-mill morning.
Exactly. The sun is shining brightly outside your window. The temperature in the room is this, like, balanced equilibrium of comfort.
Right.
That there are absolutely no immediate crises looming on your calendar. You are entirely safe.
Completely secure.
But then, as you sit up, there's this inexplicable, really heavy tightness in your throat.
Ah, yeah. The stone in the throat.
Yes, it feels exactly like you swallowed a stone. Or maybe you're sitting in a perfectly normal low-stakes meeting with your colleagues, right?
Something totally routine.
Totally routine. And suddenly you're hit with this persistent, overwhelming feeling of being incredibly small, like you're completely overlooked and in profound danger.
Even though logically you know nothing is wrong.
Right. You are entirely safe, yet your body is flashing this giant red check engine light. So our entire exploration today is about finding the manual to that engine.
Which is so needed.
Yeah.
Because it really is the ultimate human paradox, isn't it?
Oh, absolutely. How do you mean?
Well, we possess these highly evolved, analytical neocortexes that can rationalize basically anything.
Right. We can think our way out of a paper bag.
Exactly. Yet we are entirely at the mercy of these physical sensations that just seem to arise from a void.
It feels completely random.
But it's not. What is occurring in that ordinary Tuesday scenario is a profound disconnect between the external reality and the internal physiological response.
So the body is reacting violently to an invisible threat.
Spot on. And the instinct for the overwhelming majority of us is to either ignore it or drug it.
Oh, for sure. We stare at that check engine light, maybe drink an extra cup of coffee, and just hope it turns itself off.
Right? It never just turns itself off, does it?
No, it really doesn't.
It never does. Because that light is not a malfunction. It's actually a highly specific, coded message.
Okay, so a message from the subconscious.
Yes. And the error we make is assuming that the subconscious mind communicates in the exact same way the conscious mind does.
We want it to be logical.
Right. We expect logic.
Yeah.
We want a spreadsheet or, a bulleted list of grievances.
A linear timeline explaining exactly why I feel like crying at 10 a.m.
Exactly. But the subconscious does not possess the biological hardware for spoken vocabulary. It just doesn't.
So how does it talk to us?
It speaks exclusively in its native tongue, which is the language of vivid imagery, resonant color, and really profound physical sensation.
Wow.
So to heal the mind, we have to become fluent in this ancient language.
And if you're listening to this right now and, rolling your eyes at the idea of decoding vivid imagery or colors, stick with us.
Please do, because the science is fascinating.
It really is. The psychological and neurological mechanisms behind this are astounding. We're basically going to map the internal architecture of the human psyche today.
It's a massive journey.
It is. We're going to explore everything from why your brain assigns massive cosmic symbols to represent your family.
Which is wild, by the way.
So wild. To the evolutionary reasons we experience emotional states as specific, like animal frequencies.
Right. It's about recognizing that you aren't simply living a life. You are experiencing a continuous projection of an internal state.
I love that phrasing, a projection.
Yeah. And we're going to explore the mechanisms of emotional alchemy. Basically, how to actively reprogram this native language to set yourself free from that invisible weight.
Okay, I want to frame this with an analogy.
And quickly. Yep.
Your life right now is like a stage play. You're walking around on stage thinking you are completely improvising your dialogue, making free choices, directing your own actions.
You feel like you're in charge.
Right. But there is a massive silent theater director sitting way up in the dark booth.
I like this.
And this director is constantly changing the lighting from warm to cold, piping intense background music, and handing you specific, heavy props based on a script that was written before you could even speak.
That is an exceptionally precise way to describe the autonomic nervous system.
Right. It's all happening behind the scenes.
And its relationship to early conditioning is exactly like that script. And the very first step to seeing that director, to understanding that hidden script, it doesn't actually start in the mind.
Wait, it doesn't? Where does it start?
It starts in the physical body, with the most fundamental rhythm of our existence.
Oh, you mean the breath?
Yes. It starts with the endless tide of breath.
The endless tide. We experience this rhythm every single day, a vast multitude of times.
Constant, unending flow.
But it changes, doesn't it? If you watch a newborn baby sleep at the dawn of their cycle, their little bellies rise and fall with this profound, peaceful depth.
It's the perfect diaphragmatic breath.
Exactly. But as the passage of eras progresses, as we move from infancy into the complexities of adulthood, something structural shifts.
Drastically shifts.
Our breathing becomes shallow. It gets trapped right up in the upper chest, like hovering right around the collarbones.
Yes, and that physical restriction is not merely a bad habit. It directly mirrors our spiritual and emotional suffocation.
Wow. Suffocation. That's a strong word. Let's examine the mechanism behind that.
Well, the body requires a balanced equilibrium of oxygen to process stress effectively.
Okay, that makes sense.
So when trauma accumulates, and we are speaking of emotional weight that sometimes originates from the distant past, passed down through a lineage before you're even born.
Like inherited stress.
Exactly. When that happens, the nervous system registers chronic unsafety.
It constantly feels under threat.
Right. And in response, we literally physically brace ourselves against the world.
So we're tense all the time.
We pull the breath up, tight and guarded. We lift the shoulders to protect the vulnerable neck. It's a biological form of armor.
But wait, if we are walking around in a state of constant physiological defense, aren't we essentially starving our own systems of the oxygen needed to process the very stress we're defending against?
You've just described the trap perfectly.
It seems like an incredibly flawed evolutionary loop.
It really is a survival loop that has completely outlived its usefulness. Because when you breathe shallowly like that, you are continuously signaling to the vagus nerve.
Which is like the superhighway of the parasympathetic nervous system, right?
Exactly. You are signaling to that superhighway that danger is actively present.
So you're trapped in sympathetic arousal, the fight or flight state.
Yes. And breaking that loop requires intentional physical disruption.
Because you can't just talk yourself out of it.
No, you cannot simply think your way out of a physiological trap. You have to bypass the conscious mind's anxieties and speak directly to the nervous system using its own mechanical language.
Okay, which brings us to the actual techniques for disrupting this. And one of the most potent methods explored in our understanding of physiological reset is alternate nostril breathing.
It's an ancient and incredibly effective tool.
I've actually tried this, and while it feels slightly unnatural at first, the internal shift is undeniable. What is the actual mechanism at play here?
So by physically alternating the intake of breath between the left and right nasal passages, you are actively forcing a harmonization between the left and right hemispheres of the brain.
Okay, let's break that down. The left hemisphere is what? Logic.
Right. The left hemisphere is generally associated with logic, linearity, and often the calculation of fear.
The spreadsheets of our mind.
Exactly. And the right hemisphere is associated with intuition, creativity, and spatial awareness.
Okay, so how does trauma affect them?
When trauma is active, these hemispheres are entirely out of sync.
They aren't talking to each other.
Exactly. So this specific breathing technique brings that chaotic internal journey back into a balanced equilibrium.
So it forces them to hold hands again.
Yes, it calms the analytical fear center and actively engages the holistic, intuitive processing center.
That's incredible. And then there is boxed breathing, but with a very specific, crucial variation that I want to highlight.
The pursed lips.
Right. You're inhaling, holding, and exhaling in a rhythm. But the exhalation is done with pursed lips, almost like a fish blowing a bubble.
It's a tiny detail, but it changes everything.
Why? Why does that tiny physical detail matter so much?
It matters immensely due to back pressure.
Back pressure.
Yeah. Pursed lip exhaling creates a gentle, sustained resistance. This resistance slightly increases the pressure inside the airways, which keeps them open longer.
Okay, so you get more oxygen out of the breath.
Yes, but more importantly, it stimulates the baroreceptors in the lungs and heart.
And what does that do?
That actively drains the magnitude of negative, hyper-aroused energy from the physical form.
Wow. So it forces the body to relax.
It forces the heart rate to slow down, and it sends a definitive, undeniable signal to the vagus nerve that you are safe.
You are basically biologically commanding the body. You can put the armor down now.
Exactly. You are overriding the system.
I love that. You are overriding the system, which actually brings me to a story that perfectly captures this feeling of being trapped by our own physiological defenses.
Let's hear it.
There is this profound parable about a king who builds a massive, terrifyingly heavy iron door in his castle. It's dark, imposing, and looks completely impenetrable.
Okay, I can picture it.
Right. And he calls an assembly of his wisest, most educated advisors and says, I need you to open this door.
And those advisors represent our highly analytical, hypervigilant minds, I assume.
Exactly, our overthinking brains. So these brilliant scholars approach the door. They calculate the sheer weight of the iron. They analyze the massive rusted hinges. They study its overwhelming magnitude.
Getting lost in the data.
Totally lost. And they all collectively declare it is mathematically impossible. The structural integrity is too sound. The door cannot be opened.
And then what happens?
Finally, the youngest advisor, who hasn't been calculating anything at all, simply walks up to the door, places his hand on the iron, and pushes.
Just a simple push.
And it glides open effortlessly. It was never locked.
It is such a beautiful illustration of how the intellect overcomplicates the trauma response.
It really is.
The mind builds this massive fortress of logic around why we cannot change, why we are permanently stuck behind the door.
But I do have to push back on this parable just a little bit.
Oh, fair enough. Go ahead.
It is a lovely story, but it's really easy for a philosopher to say, hey, just push the door.
Sure, in theory it's easy.
Right, but what happens when the physiological fear of the door feels just as real, just as heavy as the wood and the iron?
That's the real challenge.
When your heart is pounding, your palms are sweating, and your throat is tight, telling yourself it's not locked doesn't magically make the terror vanish.
No, it doesn't.
The terror is the lock.
You are entirely correct, and that is the absolute crux of the issue. The physiological fear is a physical reality.
Exactly. You feel it in your bones.
But the illusion of the lock is the trauma itself. Trauma is what convinces your biology that the door is bolted shut.
So how do we prove to the body that it's unlatched?
The breath. Those deep, intentional, pursed lip tides of oxygen we just discussed, that is the key.
So the breath is the physical proof.
Exactly. It's the proof you offer to your body that the door is currently unlocked. You breathe deeply, your heart rate slows, the vagal tone increases, and in that moment of physiological calm, you realize you finally have the strength to push.
Okay, I am with you. So the breath doesn't make the massive iron door disappear.
No, the door is still there. Your history is still there.
It just gives you the neurological clarity to realize it's unlatched.
Precisely.
Okay, that's powerful. And once we take that first deep breath and we actually step through that heavy door, the landscape changes entirely, doesn't it?
Completely. We step into the vast hidden architecture of the subconscious,
We enter the mental archive.
the subterranean room of human history.
Okay, let's paint this picture for everyone. Picture this. The mind is structured like a massive subterranean library.
Dimly lit.
Stretching out infinitely. And it is filled with these towering, endless shelves of files, boxes, and heavy books.
A lifetime of records.
Every single hurt, every slight, every moment of terror, embarrassment, or perceived failure from the distant past is meticulously cataloged here.
Kept perfectly intact.
Right. And the crucial realization here is that these aren't just abstract digital files. They have real, profound, energetic weight.
Yes, they take up an immense magnitude of space.
And we carry all of this.
We carry a vast multitude of these heavy files on our shoulders every single day without even realizing it.
Which is exhausting.
The sheer metabolic effort of keeping them organized, suppressed, and hidden from our conscious awareness completely exhausts our daily energy.
Is that why we get so tired for seemingly no reason?
Exactly. We wonder why we are completely drained by the middle of the afternoon when we haven't done any physical labor.
Or we're just sitting at a desk.
But internally, we're doing continuous heavy lifting in that subterranean room of our mind.
Okay, so how do we clean it up? How do we heal?
To heal, we have to engage in a very active, conscious visualization. We must imagine stepping into this dusty room with a broom.
A literal broom. Okay, so you're sweeping the dust, and you take all these useless, heavy files, the grudges from childhood, the irrational fears, the outdated beliefs about your own worth,
All of it.
and you throw them into a refuse bag. But not just a regular bag, right?
No, an infinitely expanding refuse bag.
Okay, so it can hold everything. And then you take that massive, heavy bag, and you toss it into a roaring cosmic fire of unconditional love.
And you watch it burn away into nothingness.
Now I have to ask, because some people might think, I'm just imagining a fire. What good does that do?
That act of visualization is not mere daydreaming.
It's not.
Not at all. It is a direct neurological command.
How so?
The brain does not distinguish between a vividly imagined action and a physical one.
Really, it fires the same pathways.
Yes. So by visualizing the burning of the files, you are literally commanding the nervous system to release its energetic hold on those memories.
That is incredible. But as you are sweeping this room, as you're clearing out the heavy boxes of the past, you inevitably discover something else hidden in that subterranean landscape, don't you?
You do. Once the clutter is cleared, you see what was buried underneath.
In the darkest corner of this mental archive, sitting amidst all those towering shelves, is a lonely figure.
The inner child.
Yes, the very core of our emotional being.
They're sitting there, often deeply neglected, frightened.
Just waiting to be seen, waiting to be heard, and desperately wanting to be validated.
It's a heartbreaking image, but a necessary one to confront.
And this part of the framework is deeply moving to me. The guidance here is to vividly imagine walking over to that corner, getting down on their level, and actually holding this child's hand.
Physical imagined contact is crucial here.
You have to apologize to them for neglecting them, right? For ignoring their needs while you are busy trying to survive the complexities of the adult world.
We all do it. We push them aside to function in society.
And you have to firmly assert to them that the harsh words spoken by others in the distant past carry absolutely no weight anymore.
You have to become their protector.
You remind them that their natural default state is a complete wholeness of beauty and worth.
It is a profound process of reparenting.
Reparenting yourself.
Exactly.
Yeah.
If we think about the human mind systematically, the inner child is essentially the core operating system of your entire being.
Okay, let's use a modern metaphor for this because I think the old carrying heavy rocks cliche doesn't quite capture the mechanics of what's happening.
I agree. Let's update it.
It is like you are trying to run a sleek, modern, high-speed operating system, your adult career, your complex relationships, your ambition.
All the demanding applications of life.
Exactly, but you're trying to run them on a computer hardware system that is simultaneously running thousands of heavy, corrupted, outdated background applications that were coded during the distant past.
Coded for survival.
Right. You are trying to boot up a modern, healthy relationship using software that was coded to survive a childhood crisis.
And what happens to a processing system in that state?
Well, the fan spins up to maximum, the battery drains in minutes, it overheats, and eventually the entire system just crashes.
Precisely. If that core operating system, the inner child, feels unsafe or is burdened by the corrupted files of past trauma, the entire system crashes into physical illness, chronic fatigue, and intense anxiety.
It just shuts down.
The conscious adult mind wants to move forward, but the foundational programming is screaming in terror. The parameters for safety are entirely outdated.
So, if we want the system to run smoothly, we have to rescue the child and uninstall the malware.
That's the only way.
But here is where we need to bridge the gap. How does this inner child, this subconscious operating system, actually communicate its distress to us in our daily adult lives?
Because they don't have words.
Right. They don't just send us a clear, logical text message saying, hey, I'm scared today.
No, they communicate through the unique sensory lenses we use to perceive reality.
Yes, the channels of perception. Let's dig into this.
It is a fundamental psychological truth that we do not all experience the world in the same way.
We walk around assuming our reality is the objective reality.
We do, but it's an illusion. Our subconscious translates the external world through three primary systems.
The visual, the auditory, and the kinesthetic or tactile system.
Yes.
Let's break these down thoroughly because honestly, understanding this explains almost every miscommunication I've ever had in my life.
It really changes how you see relationships. Let's start with visuals.
Okay, so if you are a predominantly visual person, your subconscious is entirely focused on painting pictures.
Right, and you can even tell by how they hold their bodies. When visuals breathe, it is often high in the chest.
Oh, interesting. And when they are trying to remember something.
You will physically see their eyes look upward, as if they are literally scanning a mental projection screen above them.
I know so many people who do that. And they also require visual symmetry in their environment, right?
Yes, very much so. They get intensely, sometimes inexplicably irritated by visual chaos or clutter.
So a messy room isn't just untidy.
To a visual, a messy room is neurologically offensive. It scrambles their processing. Their entire world is constructed of light, color, and spatial arrangement.
Okay, now let's contrast that with auditories.
An auditory person processes the world through sound, tone, and rhythm.
How do they breathe?
They tend to breathe from the middle of the chest, and they are highly sensitive to noise.
Like a dripping faucet.
Exactly. A dripping faucet or a humming refrigerator might drive them to absolute madness, while a visual wouldn't even register it was happening.
They just wouldn't hear it.
Right. And here's the relationship part. An auditory won't remember what you wore to a party.
But they remember what you said.
They remember the exact cadence and the precise words you used during an argument a decade ago.
That is terrifyingly accurate.
They are captivated not by the physical appearance of a speaker, but by the rhythm and resonance of their voice.
Okay, and then there are the kinesthetics, the feelers.
Yes, the physical processors. These individuals breathe deeply from the diaphragm.
They seem very grounded.
They are. They often speak more slowly, taking their time to literally feel the weight of the words before speaking them.
They need to physically touch things to understand them, don't they?
Yes, they process the entire world through heavy emotional and physical sensation.
So to a kinesthetic, a room doesn't look bad or sound loud.
No, it feels heavy, it feels thick or tense.
To truly illustrate the magnitude of this disconnect, let's use that incredible example. Imagine sending 3 people with these different dominant traits to the exact same vacation retreat.
Yes, and asking them to describe the experience afterward.
This is a brilliant exercise. Okay, so the visual person comes back from the trip and they say, "You wouldn't believe the landscape. The flowers were so vibrant, blooming in these explosive, saturated colors."
The sunset painted the sky in streaks of gold.
Right. And the resort had these massive, bright, high-definition screens in the lobby. It is all about the light and the spectacle for them.
Completely visual. Then you ask the auditory person.
And they experience the exact same geographic location at the exact same time.
But their reality is totally different. They'll say, "It was incredible. I woke up every morning to a perfect symphony of exotic birds.
You could hear the constant, soothing crash of the waterfall in the distance.
And the acoustic guitar playing in the courtyard echoed perfectly against the stone walls."
Wow. And finally, the kinesthetic returns.
And what do they say? Because they didn't notice the sunset and they tuned out the birds entirely.
They say it was purely relaxing. The overwhelming warmth of the bubbling jacuzzi just melted the tension right out of my muscles.
Yes.
And the beds. The heavy texture of those soft linens against my skin was absolute heaven.
3 completely different realities, all born from the exact same environment.
Which brings to light a monumental challenge in human connection, particularly in how we attempt to soothe one another when we're hurting.
It really does.
Let's apply this to a real conflict. If you are an intensely visual person, but your partner is deeply kinesthetic, are you essentially speaking 2 entirely different subconscious languages when you try to comfort each other or resolve a fight?
Absolutely. You are missing each other's signals entirely, which leads to profound resentment.
Give me an example of how that plays out.
Let us say a conflict occurs. The visual partner, wanting to apologize and show love, spends 3 hours cleaning the entire house.
Oh, I see where this is going.
They organize the space, make it visually perfect, and say, "Look at what I did for you. I made our environment beautiful."
Because to them, visual harmony equals peace and love.
Exactly. But the kinesthetic partner is sitting on the couch feeling entirely unloved, thinking, "You haven't hugged me, touched my arm, or held my hand all day."
Oh, man. The house looks flawless, but the kinesthetic partner does not feel the connection.
The visual offered a beautiful painting to a person who was freezing and needed a blanket.
That is profound. It completely reframes how we judge other people's efforts in our relationships.
It requires a lot of empathy to translate those languages. Furthermore, understanding your dominant sensory trait reveals exactly how your subconscious will send you warning signs when that inner child is in distress.
Oh, this ties back to the check engine light.
Yes,
Yeah.
a visual person whose subconscious is screaming for help will experience terrifying nightmares.
Like what kind?
Dark, enclosed spaces, blinding flashes of light, or chaotic, shifting environments in their dreams.
Because their alarm system is visual, what about an auditory person?
An auditory person in distress might suffer from unexplained ringing in the ears, or be plagued by harsh, highly critical internal voices that repeat destructive phrases on a loop.
Just constant internal noise. And a kinesthetic person.
They will physically manifest the trauma.
They won't see a scary image.
They will get a crushing ache in their shoulders, a sudden knot of nausea in their stomach, or that inexplicable heady tightness in the throat we discussed at the very beginning of our conversation.
So the check engine light flashes in the specific language of your dominant sensory system.
Exactly. And once we understand how we perceive these messages, we can begin the deeper work.
Which is translating them.
Yes. We can start translating the actual content of the messages by decoding the grand cosmic symbols our mind uses to represent our deepest, most foundational relationships.
Okay, this is where we transition from sensory perception into the cosmic cartography of the mind.
The internal map.
Right. So if my kinesthetic alarm bell is ringing and I'm feeling that tightness, how do I actually find out who or what triggered it.
That is where the brain's internal filing system comes into play.
But the subconscious does not use names, birth dates, or logic to file away our core familial bonds, does it?
No, it relies heavily on massive archetypes. It assigns colossal celestial bodies and immense forces of nature to represent these figures.
But why? Why does the brain do this? Why not just use a photograph of our parents in our mind?
Because a photograph is static and finite. The relationship with our creators, the masculine and feminine forces that brought us into existence, is simply too massive, too emotionally encompassing for the subconscious to represent with a mere human face.
So we're talking about like Jungian archetypes here.
Yes, the developing mind of an infant views its parents as literal gods, as forces of nature that completely control their survival.
That makes sense. An infant is totally helpless.
Therefore, the subconscious assigns symbols that carry a matching magnitude of power.
Okay, let's map the solar system. Let's start with the center, the sun.
The primary luminary.
In the landscape of the subconscious, the sun represents the masculine energy, the father figure. But it's not just a generic sun, right? The quality of the sun tells the entire story of the relationship.
Yes, if you close your eyes and visualize your internal sky, and your sun is a bright, warm, massive sphere at high noon, that represents a complete wholeness of paternal love.
A father who was present.
Present, provided clear illumination, and offered safe warmth.
But what if the sun in your visualization is sinking low over the horizon, casting these long, dark, cold shadows?
Or what if it is pale, weak, and obscured by thick clouds?
What does that mean?
That specific imagery indicates an absent, emotionally distant, or ailing father figure. It represents a masculine energy that was fading or was simply never fully present to provide illumination in the first place.
Wow. And this particular variation gave me chills when I first learned about it. What if the sun has sharp, stabbing rays, like actual needles of light piercing the sky?
That is a very intense symbol. That signifies a harsh, demanding, and highly conditional affection.
So the warmth is technically there.
It's there, but it burns you if you get too close. It represents a paternal figure whose love required absolute perfection and often caused pain. The child learned very early that masculine attention is dangerous.
That is heavy. Okay, so balancing the sun, we have the moon.
The lunar force.
The moon represents the feminine energy, the mother. A full, luminous, massive moon radiating soft, gentle light in the night sky symbolizes a balanced equilibrium of maternal care.
It's a nurturing, complete, and ever-present emotional safety net.
Conversely, a crescent moon indicates what? A mere fragment of affection.
Yes. It represents a mother who perhaps was physically present in the room, fulfilling basic duties, but emotionally withheld her light.
So she was there, but not really there.
Only a sliver of her nurturing energy was available to the child, leaving them emotionally malnourished.
We mentioned this briefly earlier, but it warrants a much deeper exploration because it is so incredibly common. What about the surface of the moon?
Ah, the craters.
Right. The magnitude of generational trauma is often reflected in the subconscious as dark, deep craters on the moon's surface. But why craters?
Because the moon is an object in space that receives impacts.
Oh, wow.
Those craters represent the unresolved grief, the physical and emotional impacts, and the unhealed wounds of the mother and her mother before her, stretching back through the passage of eras.
So when your subconscious visualizes a heavily cratered moon, it's acknowledging that history.
It is acknowledging the immense, undeniable weight of inherited emotional pain that the maternal figure absorbed and inevitably passed down. You are quite literally seeing the battle scars of your lineage.
That is haunting, but beautiful. So you have the sun and the moon, the creators. What about the rest of the constellation?
That is where the stars come in. The stars represent siblings, cousins, and the extended kin network.
And the arrangement and density of the stars are vital diagnostic tools, right?
Absolutely. If a person visualizes their internal sky and it is entirely devoid of stars, just a vast, empty, terrifying blackness surrounding the sun and moon, it indicates a profound, deep-seated feeling of isolation from the broader family unit.
They feel completely alone.
They feel entirely disconnected, like a solitary spark with no constellation to belong to.
Okay, then we bring in the forces of nature to represent raw emotion, weather and water.
The emotional climate.
Right. If there is dark thunder rolling through your internal landscape, that is the literal echo of unexpressed anger and fear.
It is the sound of turbulent emotions that were silenced in reality, so they storm in the subconscious.
Water is a particularly potent archetype here, too.
It universally represents the flow of emotion, vitality, and love.
So if you picture muddy, insect-filled, stagnant water in a subconscious visualization. What is that?
That represents toxic, abusive, or neglectful situations. It is an environment where emotional life is trapped and simply cannot thrive.
It's the feeling of being stuck in an emotional swamp.
Precisely. But a clear, roaring waterfall.
That's the good stuff.
That is the pure, unobstructed rush of unconditional love. It is dynamic, powerful, and deeply cleansing.
Now, within this vast cosmic landscape of suns, moons, and turbulent storms, there must be an anchor, right? There must be a representation of the self that actually experiences all of this.
Yes, that anchor is the tree. The tree is the ultimate symbol of your current psychological and physical state.
Let's break down the tree, because every single part means something highly specific. The roots measure how grounded you are in reality.
Do they grip the earth firmly, absorbing nutrients? Or are they shallow, exposed, and easily uprooted by a passing storm?
And the trunk holds the weight of your physical body and your past burdens? I found this next part so fascinating. If your visualized tree has peeling, diseased bark.
Yes. The bark is the skin. It often indicates severe skin anxieties or deep feelings of physical vulnerability and a lack of protection.
A hollow trunk or dying, withered leaves signal a deep internal illness, right?
A feeling of emotional barrenness or severe loss of vital life energy. It is a system in active decay.
Okay, I have a question about this structure. Let's say someone sits down, does the breathing, closes their eyes, and visualizes their tree.
Okay, they're in the landscape.
They see this massive, thick, ancient trunk. It is incredibly wide and immovable, but when they look up, the branches are tiny, fragile, and completely bare. Doesn't that suggest a profound imbalance?
It absolutely does.
Because people usually think a thick trunk is good, but doesn't this mean they are carrying an immense past, all this heavy history in the trunk, but they feel completely cut off from a future?
That is a highly insightful interpretation. Yes, a massive trunk is not always a positive sign if it is wildly out of proportion.
Because it's all past and no future.
The trunk represents the past and the physical present. The branches are our reach into the future. They are our aspirations, our potential to grow, and our ability to seek the light.
So what does that specific image mean?
A massive, heavy trunk paired with withered, tiny branches is the visualization of a soul trapped by its history, weighed down by the past, and utterly unable to envision any future growth.
That feels incredibly tragic. To be so strong, yet so stunted.
It would be a tragedy if it were a permanent state. But this is exactly why active visualization is so incredibly potent.
Because we can change it.
You are not just a passive observer of the tree. You are the architect of the landscape.
So if you identify those fragile, bare branches, you don't just have to accept them.
No. You can actively, mentally focus your intention to grow them. You can vividly visualize them, thickening, sprouting, vibrant green leaves and stretching upward toward the light.
And what does that do in the brain?
By doing this repeatedly, you are actively rewriting the subconscious expectation of the future. You are commanding the neural pathways to prepare for growth rather than stagnation.
You are initiating neuroplasticity.
Exactly.
You are basically doing landscaping on your own soul. It's brilliant. Okay, so we have this vast internal landscape of celestial bodies, emotional weather, and deep-rooted trees.
The internal map is complete.
But here's where the framework jumps from the abstract internal world right into our daily physical reality.
This is where it gets very tangible.
Because this cosmic and natural symbology doesn't just stay in our heads. We physically, literally build these symbols into the very houses we live in.
The architecture of everyday life. This is where psychology deeply needs the physical environment.
Now, I have to be honest with you, I am incredibly skeptical of this part.
Oh, tell me why.
It is one thing to say I visualize a tree in my mind. It's another thing entirely to say that my physical house is a manifestation of my trauma.
That's a fair point of skepticism.
Right, because if my sink is clogged, the overwhelming majority of the time it's because I have long hair that went down the drain, not because I'm holding on to a toxic relationship. Are we really saying the subconscious intentionally sabotages the plumbing? Because that sounds like magic, not psychology.
Your skepticism is entirely valid, and honestly, it is the correct response. No, your subconscious does not possess telekinesis.
Okay, good.
It does not magically clog the physical pipes with its mind. What we are actually discussing is the psychological theory of embodied cognition and the function of the hippocampus.
Okay, unpack that for me.
The brain maps spatial environments in tandem with emotional states. It is not about the subconscious causing the physical breakdown. It is about your psychological tolerance for letting your environment decay when you are internally blocked.
Ah, Okay, explain that mechanism. That makes way more sense.
Think about it. If you are in a state of profound emotional avoidance, if you are actively refusing to let go of a past grievance, your brain is overwhelmed by that internal blockage.
It's taking up all your bandwidth.
Exactly. So when you look at the clogged drain in your bathroom,
Mm-hmm.
the healthy response is to clear it immediately.
Because it's annoying.
Right. But a blocked mind looks at a blocked physical drain and feels a subconscious resonance. The external blockage perfectly matches the internal state.
So you just leave it.
Therefore, you tolerate it, you ignore it for weeks. You adapt to the dysfunction, because fixing the external flow would unconsciously highlight the internal stagnation you are desperately trying to avoid.
Okay, that makes complete sense. It's not magic. It's a reflection of our threshold for dysfunction.
Exactly.
The physical house becomes a three-dimensional manifestation of our internal subterranean library. How we maintain, decorate, and interact with the physical parts of our house reveals the exact locations of our hidden emotional blockages.
Let's walk through the house using this lens.
Yes, let's start with the front door and the threshold.
In this framework of externalized psychology, the front door represents the masculine boundary.
The defense system.
It is your primary defense against the outside world, your assertion of external authority, and your ability to dictate who enters your life.
And the threshold.
The threshold, the actual space you step across to enter the warmth of the home, is the feminine, maternal embrace, welcoming you into safety and rest.
So, applying the tolerance theory we just talked about, think about what it means if your front door is constantly sticking.
Or if the hinges are rusted.
Or if the lock is broken and you just never, ever get around to fixing it, you tolerate a compromised boundary.
It reveals a severe fracture in your ability to set boundaries in your actual life.
It indicates a deep conflict with asserting your authority or protecting your own energy from external demands. You are literally leaving yourself open.
Now, moving deeper into the structure, we find the kitchen.
The heart of the home.
Across cultures, the kitchen is the universal heart of abundance. It is the space where raw resources are transformed into nourishment and life energy.
Which makes chronic issues in the kitchen so symbolically heavy. If the kitchen ceiling persistently leaks or the appliances are constantly failing,
It is a manifestation of a draining of fundamental resources.
it symbolizes a lack of foundational support from above, a lingering feeling that your ability to nourish yourself is constantly being compromised or threatened.
Then we have the bathroom, the room you challenged earlier with the sink example.
Right, the clogged drain.
This space is the center of release and expenditure. It is where we cleanse ourselves and let go of what the body simply no longer needs to survive.
So a constantly clogged drain in the bathroom or a toilet that constantly runs, it mirrors an intense subconscious fear of letting go.
Yes.
If you are ignoring that mess, it points to an inability to release material fears, past grievances, or toxic relationships. You are hoarding waste, both physically and emotionally.
And consider the windows.
Oh, the windows are so interesting.
Windows represent our worldview, the clear lens through which we observe external reality and the future.
So if the windows are perpetually dirty,
Covered in grime that we actively refuse to wash away, it means we are choosing to look at our future through the lens of past despair.
we are comfortable filtering the bright light of the present through the accumulated dirt of yesterday.
It is a profound avoidance of clarity.
Wow. And then there is the bedroom, which is the most intimate, sacred space in the structure.
The inner sanctum.
If a person's bedroom door won't close properly, or if the lock is broken and they just accept that lack of privacy, what does that signify?
It signifies a subconscious bleeding of intimacy. It reveals a profound lack of authority within their most vulnerable close relationships. They cannot or will not protect their most sacred emotional space.
It is a striking realization when you look around your own home with this in mind.
It really changes how you view a maintenance to-do list.
It changes everything. The house is a living, breathing canvas of our mental state. We walk around grumbling, thinking we are just lazy about chores or terrible at DIY repairs.
But there's a deeper reason.
Actually, our subconscious is allowing the sink to remain clogged or ignoring the broken lock to force us to look at the exact emotional blockage we refuse to deal with internally.
That is precisely the dynamic loop. We shape our environments to reflect our internal state, but then crucially, our environments continually reinforce our psychological state.
So it's a two-way street.
Yes. Living with a broken front door every single day sends a continuous, subliminal message back to the subconscious that your boundaries are weak and you are unsafe. It creates a self-sustaining cycle of anxiety.
So if the loop goes both ways, does fixing the house fix the mind?
In many profound ways, yes.
Really?
The act of repairing the physical door, of actually scrubbing the grime off the windows, can sometimes be the essential first step in fixing the internal boundary.
Because it's an action.
By taking definitive, physical action in your environment, you signal to the subconscious through embodied cognition that a new rule is being established. You are demonstrating to yourself that you are no longer tolerating dysfunction.
That is incredibly empowering. Okay, so we have looked at the massive scale of celestial bodies, and we've looked at the physical architecture of our homes.
We've covered a lot of ground.
But we need to discuss the raw, pulsing emotional energy we carry within us minute by minute. According to the framework, this emotional energy is often personified by two other major symbolic systems.
The animal kingdom and the spectrum of color.
The frequencies of the soul. This is how the limbic system categorizes autonomic nervous system states, right?
Exactly.
Let's talk about these emotional frequencies. Emotional states vibrate at different levels of intensity, and the subconscious visualizes these varying frequencies as specific animals. But why animals?
Because before we had complex language, our ancestors understood the world entirely through predator and prey dynamics.
It's primal.
Very. Let's start at the bottom of the emotional frequency scale, the low frequency states.
Okay. In the realm of the lowest frequency, we find the lizard.
The reptile.
The lizard represents a heavy, dragging reptilian state of profound worthlessness. It is a survival-only mode, cold-blooded, reactive, and completely devoid of higher aspiration. When you feel the lizard energy, you basically want to hide under a rock.
That's a perfect description of severe depression or shame.
Then, moving slightly up the scale, there is the goat.
A very different energy.
The goat is the embodiment of stubborn, unyielding resistance. It digs its hooves into the side of the mountain and refuses to budge, actively blocking the natural flow of life, progress, and compromise.
And perhaps the most difficult low-frequency state to break out of is represented by the sheep or the lamb.
The flock mentality.
This is the ultimate, total victim consciousness. It is someone who has entirely surrendered their personal agency. They're waiting to be led by the flock, or worse, waiting to be sheared by a predator, feeling utterly powerless to change their own circumstances.
Moving up the scale, we hit the mid-frequency states. Here we find the cow or the duck. What do they represent?
These animals represent a supreme, almost overwhelming maternal sacrifice.
Giving too much.
Yes. It is the energy of giving absolutely everything to others, providing milk, or plucking your own feathers to warm a nest, often to the point of complete self-erasure and exhaustion.
And alongside them is the dog. The dog represents intense loyalty and eager companionship. However, if this energy is unbalanced, it can represent a massive energy drain.
A constant anxious need for external validation and a complete inability to be alone or self-soothe, the anxious attachment style.
But then we reach the high-frequency states, the apex predators of the emotional landscape.
The tiger or the panther.
These symbolize raw, untamed physical energy. They represent fearlessness, absolute grace under pressure, and the masterful execution of boundary setting.
A panther does not ask for permission to take up space in the jungle. It simply occupies it with undeniable authority.
I want panther energy. And these animal frequencies are deeply paired with colors, aren't they?
They are. The subconscious paints our moods to give them visceral impact.
Let's go through them. Black is not just an absence of light. It is the heavy, dense armor we wear to hide our profound pain. It is a shroud of absolute protection when we feel too vulnerable to be seen.
Red is the flash of immediate life-threatening danger, fiery passion, and untethered anger. It is the loud alarm bell of the soul, demanding immediate attention.
Yellow carries the frequency of sickness, decay, or deep festering betrayal. Think of the sickly yellow of an aging bruise or a dying, withered leaf. It is energy that has gone bad.
Purple, however, is the ultimate healer in this spectrum.
Why purple?
It is a highly complex color, created by perfectly balancing the furious, active fire of red with the tranquil, deep calm of blue. It exists to quiet a chaotic mind and bring spiritual and mental equilibrium.
And white is the pure, unfiltered truth of the soul. It is absolute clarity. Now consider how people unconsciously use these colors to communicate their internal state.
Through their wardrobes and homes.
Exactly. If someone constantly, obsessively surrounds themselves in gray walls, a gray wardrobe, gray furniture, they are actively wrapping themselves in the fog of confusion and indecision.
They are building a visual camouflage to avoid facing these stark, unavoidable realities of black and white. They are literally hiding in the mist.
It is a visual manifestation of a refusal to make a choice.
Yes.
I have to ask a specific question here, tying all the way back to the physical sensations we discussed at the very beginning.
Bring it back to the Tuesday morning.
Right. If I suddenly feel that inexplicable, heavy tightness in my throat during a meeting, and I use these tools, I do the pursed-lip breathing to calm my vagus nerve, I close my eyes, and I ask my subconscious for an image. And suddenly, I vividly visualize a massive frog sitting right there in my windpipe.
Okay, the frog.
What is the frog trying to tell me?
The frog is a remarkably potent symbol in this framework. It represents unrealized potential and trapped expression.
Trapped expression.
Think of what a frog does in nature. It takes massive leaps, it transforms from a water-breathing tadpole to a land-dwelling creature, and it vocalizes incredibly loudly.
The ribbit.
Yes, if a frog is sitting heavily in your throat, it represents the vital leaps you refuse to take out of fear. It is the heavy physical weight of the truth that was stifled, the important words you swallowed to keep the peace.
Wow.
It sits there, blocking the airway, because your authentic, loud voice is trapped behind it.
That is an incredibly vivid, terrifyingly accurate way to understand anxiety. It's not just a random muscle spasm. It is swallowed truth.
Exactly.
But the crucial takeaway here is that we are not meant to live our entire lives with frogs blocking our throats or dragging the cold-blooded lizard of worthlessness in our chests. We have the inherent biological power to elevate these symbols.
And that brings us to the culmination of this entire discussion today, the alchemy of healing.
Active internal alchemy. This is the mechanism by which we finally take back control from that invisible theater director in the booth.
We become the director.
We can consciously transform low-frequency symbols into high-frequency ones, and in doing so, completely shift our physiological and emotional reality.
Here's the ultimate technique.
Walk us through it.
When you locate a low-frequency symbol in your body, let us say you identify the lizard of worthlessness dragging down your posture and keeping your breathing shallow. You do not go to war with it.
Wait, you don't fight it?
No. Fighting it gives it metabolic energy. It reinforces the sympathetic nervous system's belief that there is an active threat to fight.
Oh, that makes sense.
Instead, you acknowledge it. You actually thank it.
You thank the lizard. If I'm feeling worthless, I'm supposed to say thank you.
Yes, and the psychology behind this is vital. You say, thank you for trying to protect me by keeping me small and hidden.
Not protect me.
Because at some point in your past, usually in childhood, making yourself small and unnoticeable was a valid survival strategy. The lizard served a crucial purpose once.
It kept you safe when you couldn't fight back.
Exactly. By thanking it, you remove the hostility. Then you visualize placing that lizard into a glowing sphere of light, and you release it, sending it away into the vast cosmic void. You detach with immense gratitude, not anger.
But nature abhors a vacuum. You cannot just leave an empty space in your chest where the lizard used to be. You have to actively elevate the energy.
You consciously, willfully transform the lingering energy into the highest symbolic frequency available.
The phoenix.
The phoenix is the ultimate universal symbol of transmutation. It is capable of doing what the human ego fears most: burning away the old self, incinerating the inherited wounds and outdated defense mechanisms, and then rising from its own ashes with complete wholeness, radiating dazzling, blinding light.
So you envision the heavy lizard leaving, and in its place, the fierce fire of the phoenix ignites in your chest, warming the body and expanding the breath. That is incredibly powerful.
It changes your entire posture.
But the healing isn't just about us individually, is it? We mentioned the craters on the moon earlier, the inherited trauma passed down through the eras. How do we perform alchemy on history? How do we break the generational chain?
This is perhaps the most monumental visualization one can undertake, and it relies heavily on the concept of epigenetics and breaking cycles of inherited stress.
Okay, lay it out for us.
Imagine standing as that resilient, deeply rooted tree we spoke of earlier. But now, visualize that behind you stretches a vast, endless constellation of your ancestors.
The whole family line.
The masculine line stands on one side, stretching back through the passage of eras. The feminine line stands on the other.
And as you look back at them, you realize that all of them, in their own pain, ignorance, and suffering, are pouring their unresolved trauma, their fears, and their sorrows down the timeline, straight into your roots.
They are flooding your system with their unhealed wounds. You are absorbing the immense weight of centuries.
So how do we stop it?
To break the chain, you must visualize constructing a cosmic filter. Imagine a radiant, impenetrable net of brilliant light positioned directly between you and that vast constellation of history. This net catches all their trauma, all their outdated fears, before it reaches your roots.
And then comes the declaration. You have to face this massive crowd of history and you declare to them, your fate is yours, my fate is mine, I am the end of your pain.
Then you visualize taking a massive symbolic shear, a tool of definitive, irreversible action, and you forcefully cut the heavy, rusted chains binding you to their history.
I think about it this way. Inherited trauma is not just carrying your grandfather's heavy rocks. It is like inheriting his corrupted hard drive.
Another great tech metaphor.
You are trying to live your beautiful modern life using a survival software that was coded during a war or a famine that happened long before you were even born. You've been running that corrupted software because you thought that was how you honor your family.
Loyalty through suffering.
Exactly. But you don't have to run their corrupted programs to honor them. You honor them by finally formatting the drive, installing a new operating system, and finally running free.
That is the exact essence of it, and we must finalize this thought with a profound urological truth. The subconscious mind, and by extension the nervous system, is completely, utterly obedient to our focused intention.
Because it doesn't know the difference between real and imagined.
As we established, it does not know the difference between a vividly imagined reality and a physical one. If you repeatedly, consistently visualize the phoenix rising in your chest, and you repeatedly visualize the definitive severing of those heavy ancestral chains,
Your body responds.
your nervous system will literally physically rewire itself. The neural pathways will alter to reflect that new liberated reality. Your vagal tone will improve, your baseline of anxiety will drop.
You literally imagine yourself into a new biology. Let's finish the imagery for everyone listening. Imagine that after those heavy chains are cut, the pure, clear water of unconditional love finally rushes down from your bright, warm sun and your full, smooth moon.
Unobstructed.
It is no longer obstructed by the mud and debris of the past. It washes over the phoenix, filling your entire physical body with a profound, radiant warmth.
It is a complete return to equilibrium. The operating system is finally restored to its original flawless state.
As we pull back from this incredible landscape, let's reflect on what this all truly means.
It's a lot to process, I know.
It is, but the human mind, despite how trapped it feels on a bad Tuesday morning, is not a locked iron cage of inevitable suffering. It is a magnificent, highly malleable landscape.
You can change the scenery.
The power to change a terrifying snake of anxiety into a soaring bird of freedom does not lie solely with external circumstances. It lies entirely within your own conscious awareness and your willingness to learn the language of your own soul. You, and you alone, are the absolute architect of your inner universe.
You hold the key to the iron door that was never truly locked.
So I want to leave you with a final provocative thought to mull over as you go about your week.
Something to watch out for.
Exactly. The next time you look around your physical world, maybe you notice a flickering light in your hallway that you have ignored for months. Maybe you realize your bedroom door refuses to close all the way and you've just accepted the lack of privacy. Or perhaps out of nowhere, you feel a sudden, unexplained craving to wear a bright, vibrant purple shirt when you normally hide in gray.
Pay attention to those moments.
Ask yourself, what is the brilliant architect inside you desperately trying to say? The check engine light is flashing in brilliant colors and complex cosmic symbols. Are you finally ready to listen?